Welcome back to another video. At this point, it's been about 10 or 11 months, about a year into my gymnastics journey, and I thought it'd be a good time to talk about what you should know before starting gymnastics as an adult. So I did make a similar video to this a while ago. It was actually called 5 Things I Wish I Knew Before Starting Gymnastics, and this video is an extension to that video in the sense that I have learned a lot more since then. If you've seen my other videos, I'm sure you can corroborate that point. But I also wanted to talk about some more general points that I think are really applicable. So without further ado, let's get into it. Whoops, sorry folks, wrong video. Number 1, don't worry about doing something stupid or feeling self-conscious. So one of the gyms I train at, there are a lot of really high-level ex-gymnasts, like collegiate level, and then there's me. For the average person, walking into a room where you're clearly the worst, and maybe even by a long shot, can be a little intimidating. For whatever reason though, that wasn't the case for me, but I think I'm a little atypical in that regard. But I definitely know that's not normal. I've talked to a lot of other newbies, and the general consensus is definitely that people tend to feel a little intimidating going into a gymnastics class for the first time when they don't have a gymnastics background. So I just wanted to say, if you have this mentality and it's preventing you from going to a gymnastics class or returning to one, then don't worry, you're definitely not alone. A lot of people feel this way, and it will pass as long as you just keep going. But if you're still worried, here's an anecdotal story about me doing something embarrassing that will hopefully make you feel better. In one of the first classes I attended, I remember I was trying to get these mats that were on the opposite side of the floor from me. So I ran across the spring floor to go get them. And at the time I didn't realize, but I'm pretty sure this was the case looking back, that there were people standing in the corners of the spring floor waiting for me to get across so they could perform a tumbling pass. And this is a bit of a gymnastics no-no to just run across the floor like that, for obvious reasons, mainly being injury prevention. You know, you don't want to cause a train wreck by colliding into someone doing like a bunch of backflips or back handsprings or whatever on the floor, but also because you don't need to make them wait when you can easily just walk around the spring floor to get to the opposite side. But again, I did not realize this at the time because I was so new. So here I am frolicking across the floor, and when I get to about the middle of the spring floor, like right in the middle, I trip and fall flat on my face. And there was not a single thing nearby me to trip over. Like, I had no excuse. It's like my entire body just forgot to be coordinated, and I just went straight down, just face plant. And I remember getting up really quickly and trying to get off the floor as quickly as I could, hoping that no one saw me because it was definitely embarrassing. And when I got off the floor, one of the other gymnasts came up to me and asked,
"Did you just trip over nothing and fall?"
Embarrassing, right? But then she said, "Don't worry, we've all been there. It's actually kind of a gymnastics rite of passage to do something cool and then just totally eat it while walking." And that's exactly right. That's exactly the point. You don't know if what you're gonna do is actually a gymnastics rite of passage because you're new. There's no way for you to know better. So might as well go out there, learn as you go, embrace the taboos as you accidentally commit them, and have a good jolly time. But since you heard my story, try not to run directly across the spring floor, especially if it looks like there might be people waiting in the corners about to do a pass. So this next point is relevant to a certain style of gymnastics class where it's basically treated like open gym. It's very self-paced. And that way people of all levels can go and work on what they want to work on and progress at the level and the pace that's right for them. So if this is the type of class that's available in your area, or you're learning by going to open gyms, then this point might be applicable to you. If not, feel free to listen anyways because it might be entertaining. One of the classes I attend does have this structure, and the people in it tend to have a pretty strong gymnastics background. So when they show up, they know exactly what to do, exactly how to use the equipment to achieve whatever goals they're working on. However, if you're like me and you go to one of these types of classes for the first time, you'll have no idea what to do. There's just a lot of equipment, and without having any experience on how to use them and what progressions to do, it can be a little bit overwhelming. So if there is an instructor milling about, and if you're attending a class there probably will be, then then try and get your questions in at the very beginning of the class. Because that way, no matter what, even if they only work with you for just a little bit, you're guaranteed to have some stuff to be able to do, some stuff that you can work on. People tend to take a while to warm up and get going, so while the rest of the participants in the class are like getting into their groove, if you already get your questions in, then you won't feel like people are waiting on you or you're holding anybody back. And then in the middle of the class, if you're feeling brave or if the instructor doesn't look very busy, you can go and ask another set of questions. Maybe learn some new progressions for a different skill that you want to work. And slowly over time, as your questions get answers and you learn more things you can do, you'll get more tools in your toolbox and you'll become more and more self-sufficient. Now, I think the big thing here is to just not get discouraged, because it's going to feel overwhelming, like you don't know anything for quite a while. But if you keep going and you keep asking questions specifically at the very beginning of the class, you will build up that knowledge. It just takes time. And the other thing that you should definitely do is make friends in the class. What? Make friends with the other gymnasts, because they know a lot as well, and they can help you, give you ideas of drills and tips to do, as well as encourage you to go to the gym on days when your motivation feels low. It's just nice to have friends to train with in general. Number 3. Now this might sound surprising to some of you, but if you do a skill and it goes poorly, like you almost land on your head or you just straight up land on your head, do it again. Now, of course, this does not apply if you get injured, but if you're able to repeat the skill in a safe environment, like if someone comes and spots you, then you should definitely do it again. The more time that passes before you repeat that skill again, the more fear that will build, and it can potentially really hinder your progress. For adults doing gymnastics for the first time, oftentimes confidence can be harder to build than learning how to do the skill itself, so it's really important to not let that fear get away too easily. Number 4, prioritize flexibility and mobility just as much as strength. And if you're wondering what the difference is between the two, here's some definitions. Flexibility is basically the ability to passively lengthen your muscles. So think about doing the splits on the floor. Gravity is pushing you down and you're just kind of relaxing into it, letting your muscles elongate. Whereas mobility is the ability to actively move a joint through a range of motion. So instead of doing the splits on the floor, think about doing it vertically or standing. You have to engage the muscles in your leg to lift that leg up and maintain that structure. Much harder than doing the splits on the floor, right? When I first started gymnastics, I knew that I wasn't that mobile, so the skills that I chose to work on didn't require a lot of mobility or flexibility. Like backflips. Backflips were the very first skill that I started working on, and eventually I added in front flips and side flips. However, I did know that eventually I wanted to work split-legged tricks, like aerials, as well as skills that required more hamstring flexibility, like handstand press. So I think I did a pretty good job making sure to stretch my lower body frequently and regularly from the very beginning. However, what I didn't prioritize as much, purely because I just didn't realize it or think about it, was my thoracic and shoulder mobility. But I did make sure to work on full body strength. So what ended up happening is that I created an imbalance in my upper body where I was much stronger than I was mobile, which did not help my gymnastics. If you've watched some of my other videos, I'm sure you are well aware of that, because I made 3 videos talking about this subject because it really surprised me. So check those videos out if you haven't seen them. It definitely showcases a good learning experience for me. But the moral of the story basically was that gymnastics is a full body sport in all sense of the meaning. Every single muscle, head to toe, ends up getting worked in every dimension of the sense. Gymnastics is just such a holistic sport, which is actually one of the reasons why I love it. That being said, it definitely is possible to overpower a skill and be able to do a skill without much flexibility. I'm sure you've seen people do handstand press when they're not that flexible. Their hamstrings aren't that flexible and their pancake flexibility isn't that good, yet they're still able to do a handstand press because they just have so much upper body strength that they can just muscle themselves up. And you've probably seen the same thing with back handsprings, where someone with just a lot of power and explosiveness can jump backwards and still manage to get their hips over their shoulders when their hands touch the ground without having much back flexibility. Being able to do a skill like that may work better for some people, but it is definitely less efficient. You definitely have to put more work into it to be able to do it. And for the average person, it's definitely easier learning a skill, and oftentimes safer too, depending on the skill, to work strength and flexibility simultaneously. Number 5. Don't be afraid to question the coach. Now for context, I've gone to every single gymnastics gym in the greater Seattle area and have therefore interacted with quite a few coaches. And all of them are great, don't get me wrong. However, there have been a couple of instances where I was a bit skeptical about the advice I was given, which I think is normal. Honestly, I think you should be thinking critically about what you do with your body, especially if it's something potentially dangerous. I remember at one point I was having trouble doing back handsprings without lower back pain, so I stopped training that skill for a while and really focused on my spine flexibility. Because the problem was, when I jumped backwards in the back handspring, I wasn't flexible enough to evenly distribute the force, so my back would end up hinging at the most flexible point of my back, which happened to be my lower back, which was why I ended up feeling so much pressure on one vertebrae and why it was hurting. So the thought was to stop doing that skill for a while and just really focus on getting my back more mobile. However, one of the coaches disagreed with me and told me that I shouldn't work on flexibility and I should just work on generating more power so I wouldn't need flexibility at all to do the skill. Now I can see how overpowering a skill would reduce the need for flexibility and how it works for him and would probably work for a lot of other people, but for me, I really didn't think it was a good idea because if I ever wasn't able to overpower the skill, I would run the risk of hurting my back. And that wouldn't be great, especially since I have a long-standing history of lower back pain as well as a previous lower back injury. So I ended up getting a second opinion from a couple different coaches at different gymnastics gyms, and they all unanimously agreed that I should pursue the more mobile route. Now, just to clarify, I don't usually disagree with the coach. It happens extremely infrequently because most of the time everything they say makes total sense. But I definitely think it's healthy to pressure check and maybe even go ask for second opinions if you're unsure. Better safe than sorry. And that's all I have for you today. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more from me. My goal here is to get famous enough on YouTube so that I can go train at one gym consistently at a reasonable hour. So help a sister out. And share this video with someone you know interested in adult gymnastics. And I'll see you next time. Bye!